Mike's Daily Podcast.
Episode 1147. Hello, it's Mike Matthews broadcasting from Cafe Anyway, located somewhere in Podcastro Valley, Mont. Today we hear from Madame Rootabega, Valentino, Bison Bentley, plus bring you the return of the much-loved news segment called News Random. We have a very interesting story about a fantastic musician.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
That has been around quite a while, and actually knew someone that sang with him. We'll find out who.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
And I have started to realize there are two people in this world. Yeah, there are boys and there are girls, but there are also people who have listened to this podcast and some that have not, and people that go, what's a podcast? What have you got there? What is a podcast, Mike?
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Mike, do you write these songs out ahead of time? The answer, obvious.
Mike's
So,
Daily
I've decided
Podcast.
that I would mention.
Yeah!
Well, first off, who are the people that don't listen to this podcast? Most of the known world. But also the guy that I produced the show for, the Monday show at the radio station I work at, or the morning show, Monday through Friday. He told me once, he said, hey, I saw you posted your podcast on Facebook. Just want to let you know, well, he asked me, should I listen to it? And I go, well, and he said, do you do a lot of like women's voices and stuff? And I said, yeah. And he goes, okay, no. That's fine. The other radio station I work for on the weekend, I have the duty of putting DJs on the air that are broadcasting from, events on the weekend. Like, come on down, or the grand opening of whatever. And usually when I get done working with that DJ, we work for a couple of hours on the remote. And then that DJ will usually say to me, okay, Mike, thanks a lot. Hey, good. I see you're still doing your podcast. I see you have a lot of pretty women that you talk to on your podcast. I've posted a picture of me with a pretty woman for my podcast once. Oh, look who just walked in. Hello, Michael Matthews, it's Madame Rootabega. I am on your show all the time and I am pretty. Ooh. I stand corrected, yeah. So I know everyone I work with in radio doesn't listen to this podcast, so that's fine. And then one of the people that I've had on this show multiple times, Robert Owen Welsh, with the segment Welsh on the World, which we haven't done that in a long time. I know he never, ever listened to a show that he was on. I would tell him, Robert, you're on the show today. Remember we recorded that? He'd be like, oh, that's great. He never listened to it. I know my ex-wife never listens to this podcast. Yeah, I don't think... I'm not going to say anything about her, but, I just know that. Also, any of my exes, any of my roommates, I've had 2 roommates. My current roommate makes 3. All those roommates never listen to my podcast. Oh, look who else just walked in.
Hello, Mike. It's Valentino, the parking attendant.
And this is Bison Bentley. Do you know that?
Mike, we don't listen to this podcast either.
But you're in the podcast now. You're hearing it now, so technically you're wrong.
Technically, I could punch you in the nose right now, dude.
Yeah, violence. Do you know that? Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm really excited about hotspots provided. Hotspots! Not hot flashes. Hotspots that are provided by a certain huge cable company that I use. I'm not going to mention them because they're not giving me any money off of my monthly bill. But I am kind of cool. I think it's kind of cool because I can access. There's hotspots. I didn't realize how many hotspots this company has. I can be anywhere, like in the Bay Area, and practically access a hotspot and thus not use my data on my phone. So therefore, I can have the cheapest data on the planet. That's part of my Cutting Corners segment for you today.
The Cutting Corners Corner.
The Cutting Corners Corner. Yeah. So if you get with this humongous, horrible cable company that if you don't ever try and call them, you won't get a hold. You'll talk to somebody in the Philippines and they have a hard time speaking English. It's frustrating as all get out. I even posted, this was many podcasts ago, I posted a conversation I had with one of these people from this company, one of the public service people, whatever you call them, public service, but one of the people that answers the phone, one of them. And it was a painful conversation because they would not give me what I needed. You know, but the hotspots thing is cool. Anyway, I was at Walnut Creek on Saturday, and I mentioned beautiful women at the mall. You know, last podcast I was talking about that there just seems to be a cascade of lovely ladies at the mall, it seems, all the time. At this particular one I work near in Pleasanton. But I must say, Walnut Creek on a Saturday night, the women are beautiful and they're dressed up. And it's also, you won't find any parking in Walnut Creek on a Saturday night, just downtown. And I guess there's two main streets. There's one that's called North, one that's called South. So that's fancy. I remember going to Walnut Creek back in the early 90s. I was dating a woman from college that I met in college. I met her at UCSB, and she lived all the way up in Walnut Creek. I would drive up there. I destroyed a car driving up to try and keep the romance going to see her in Walnut Creek. And that's when I first visited Walnut Creek, was back in the early 90s. And I remember it being, a lot of big companies there already then. And a lot of money. And that's even grown more so over the 500 years since then. By the way, Jennifer Garner and Matthew Modine still have not made a movie that's been highly successful. They're not in the Suicide Squad movie. I think the most successful movie they've had is that Christian movie. I bring that up for no apparent reason, but one last thing about phones and my podcast and whatever. My website apparently shows up much better on a Droid system phone than on a Apple iOS phone. Just so you know. You can access this website for my podcast at mikesdailypodcast.com, and you find the podcast picture. Speaking of which, today's podcast picture.
And here's today's podcast picture.
A place where I have posted a podcast flyer for the Mike's Daily Podcast, and I put the flyer in this place, and it stayed there for over a year. I was quite impressed, but now it is gone. But then I replaced it, and I was just there last week. It's called Eon Coffee. They're not giving me a free coffee for saying this, although I have gotten many a free coffee there because I used that, what's it called, Belly or 4-star, or one of those reward things that you click every time. Anyway, Cafe Anyway, what a bunch of nice kids that work there. Just the nicest folks. Anyway. Cafe Anyway. I love that. So I got a picture of it, and they got this cool palm tree, and it was just before they were closing. Oh, this was Friday night. Oh, yeah, that's right, because I walked in there, and they were playing on their flat screen the Olympics, the opening ceremony with all the bugs. Is that really something that they should have in their opening ceremony, the bugs? What with the Zika virus and everything? What? Hey, I was looking myself up on Google Play, by the way, going back to the Droid thing. You have to type out my whole name for my show, Mike's Daily Podcast. And if you have a podcast, probably will be the same thing. Google Play is very finicky. You have to put every bit of knowledge that you have with it. It's so early, words gone out of my brain. Mike'sDailyPodcast.com also is where you can find the link to where you can find us on Google Play and many other places where you can listen to the show. The past podcast pictures are there. If you'd like to help out the show, there's an Amazon link. You can click on that, buy whatever it is you were going to buy on Amazon. That helps us out. There's also the PayPal if you want to donate. You'll get a special Cafe Anyway greeting from all the Cafe Anyway characters. here. Let's get to the segment News Random.
News Random.
I was brave for so long, Marianne. It's time we began to laugh and cry and cry and laugh about it all.
Love that song. Leonard Cohen. He's an interesting guy. That's back when he was young and his voice was in a higher register. His voice then, as he got older, dropped way down, and he wrote it. He wrote it all the way down. He said, you know what? I don't care. My voice is deeper. I can do other songs with my deep, deep voice. So then years later, he would do that, what was that one? Suzanne, all kinds of deep voice type songs.
Everybody knows there's...
Yeah. But back then, his voice was high. He penned that emotional song in response to a woman named Marianne Illen. An actual person. And he penned an emotional final letter to her recently. She also inspired his song Bird on the Wire. I did not know. She died July 29th, and he wrote a emotional final letter to her. This revealed by Marianne's friend Jan Christian Mollestad. According to Mollestad, after he informed Cohen of Illen's looming death from leukemia, the legendary singer, songwriter, poet responded 2 hours later with a beautiful letter, which Mollestad then read to Illen. It said, "Well, Marianne, it's come to this time when we are really so old and our bodies are falling apart, and I think I will follow you very soon. Know that I am so close behind you that if you stretch out your hand, I think you can reach me. And you know," the letter goes on to say, "that I've always loved you for your beauty and your wisdom, but I don't need to say anything more about that, because you know all about that. But now, I just want to wish you a very good journey. Goodbye, old friend. Endless love. See you down the road." 2 days later, Marianne lost consciousness and slipped into death. Her funeral was held on Friday in her native Oslo, Norway. I found this story on Yahoo, the Yahoo Music section. So Yahoo is still relevant in some way. And I get to play this little thing right here. You know, it's interesting that Leonard Cohen met Marianne in the 60s while vacationing on the Greek island of Hydra. He ultimately invited her and her infant son to live with him in Montreal. They remained together for the next 7 years, and their relationship served as Cohen's inspiration for songs of Leonard Cohen's. Featured that song we heard earlier, and also songs from A Room's Bird on the Wire. Also, Hey, That's No Way to Say Goodbye. Leonard verified his Facebook page, also mentioned that Marianne mentioned a series of written tributes from her friends and Leonard Cohen biographers, as well as a letter Mollestad wrote to Cohen informing the singer of Marianne's death. As we go outside a cafe anyway, we bring a Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcastro Valley. It's just so beautiful, you know, a friendship can last a lifetime. And it's really beautiful when that happens. You know, now that I've gotten all schmaltzy on you, I'd just like to say thank you for listening to this podcast. Thanks for listening about all the people that don't listen to this podcast. And thanks for listening to this horse. Next show, it's going to be Chely Shoehart, Floyd the Floorman, and John Deere the engineer. So long, podcast listener. Hopefully we shall meet again soon.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com. Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye!